for Market podcast.
Our local ag lender, they set up a grant program offering beginning farmers, a grant, like we've seen many times before. But it was quite a significant grant, and it was a very competitive program. They were awarding 2 to 3 projects, farm projects in Oregon. And it's specifically a grant for startup farms. And one of our farm launch participants applied and got the grant, which they said was largely due to the business plan that they had and their ability to share that, with the lender, to be able to share their vision and their ideas for their farm clearly, and to be able to fully back it up in all the different directions.
Hello and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Kait Crowley, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 33 years, the magazine for flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
I am so excited to welcome Bootstrap Farmer as a sponsor of the podcast. I've known them for a dozen years, and if anyone tells you nothing is made in the USA anymore, well, they're headquartered and warehoused in Paris, Texas. They make their own all-metal, all-inclusive greenhouse frames of steel made in the USA and fabricated in Texas, and their heavy-duty, reusable propagation and microgreens trays are Midwest-made. With a complete range of supplies, they have just about everything for propagation and growing, including heat mats, ground cover, frost blankets, silage tarps, irrigation, and trellising. Want to color code your seed starting flats? They've got heavy-duty trays that will last for years in a full range of colors. Great for keeping farm seedlings separate from retail or just for fun. And they have an experienced team of growers to support everything they sell. If you've heard of the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative providing grants for hoop houses, but have been put off by the paperwork, Bootstrap Farmer has a guide that will walk you through the application process so you can get your hoop house funded this winter. For all that and more, check out Bootstrap Farmer at bootstrapfarmer.com. We all know that to a farm of any size, your soil is your most steadfast partner, an asset worthy of investing in. Since 1972, Ohio Earth Food has been the go-to source for soil testing, consulting, as well as the highest performing and most cost-effective granular and liquid fertilizers, seed starting soils, foliar sprays, and disease and insect controls. All approved for use on organic farms. They deliver them right to your farm, too. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in their Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in the soil before you plant, and rest assured that your plants will have all of the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. These natural blends utilize compost, kelp, and humate and are low salt index safe for high tunnels. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com, now with branches in Ohio and Wisconsin. ohioearthfood.com.
Hello, everyone. Today, I am talking with Geoffrey Van and Kait Crowley of Rogue Farm Corps, a statewide nonprofit that trains and equips the next generation of farmers and ranchers in Oregon. RFC's farmer training program seeks to train an inclusive and diverse next generation of farmers through on-farm training and mentorship, classes, farm tours and discussions, networking in the agricultural community, and connecting with other beginning farmers. RFC's Future Farm program addresses systemic barriers to accessing land, capital, and other resources by providing the education and networking for farmland leasing and transfer, farm business technical assistance and resources, and assistance on collaborative models of farming. So plenty to talk about there. Both Geoffrey and Kait have many years of involvement in farming. Before becoming current RFC's Farmer Training Program Manager, Kait completed an advanced apprenticeship with Rogue Farm Corps in 2018. Kait also co-founded PK Pastures, a certified organic and animal welfare approved pastured livestock operation. Geoffrey was born and raised in Hong Kong. After school, he began working on farms in New Mexico and Oregon. In 2017, Geoffrey and 4 friends started Spoonful Farm in Thorpe, Washington, where they primarily raised livestock, grew vegetables, and made value-added products. In late 2020, Geoffrey began working at Rogue Farm Corps, where he is director of the Future Farms program. Welcome, Geoffrey and Kait. I'm so glad to have you guys here today. So, I briefly shared a short version of each of your bios, but I'd love for you to share with our audience a mini story of how each of you got involved in farming and to where you are today. So, I don't know who wants to go first. Geoffrey, Kait, draw straws.
I can kick it off.
Okay, thanks.
Let's
Kait.
see. Real quick. So I am from the Pacific Northwest here on the West Coast, but I got into farming shortly after undergrad when I was living on the East Coast, studying liberal arts, nothing to do with sustainable agriculture at all. And I got into farming from an interest in systems change, politics, and praxis, and was really fortunate to find my first internship at one of the longest running CSA farm programs in the country. My first internship was at a spot called the Community Supported Garden at Genesis Farms. Long mouthful. But they've been running a CSA program since the 80s, and I was delighted with the work there. 300 member CSA, deep community engagement and involvement, some crowd funding for different farm projects. It really exemplified for me everything that I wanted to see in terms of community, food systems change, and the type of world that I wanted to participate in and live in. So I was hooked. Did not go back to my burgeoning attempt at an art degree or art career in New York City and switched to farming instead. And then after that, I spent about a decade finding different farm employment opportunities, kind of worked my way across the US, exploring different bioregions. So no formal farm education training beyond learning and working on the job. And after a couple of different management level positions, I knew that I was ready to take my farm career to the next level and start an operation of my own. And after some research, I found Rogue Farm Corps in Oregon and moved to the state specifically for an advanced apprenticeship opportunity there. And then started my own farm operation the fall after that experience wrapped.
Oh, awesome. So you are in Oregon because of Rogue Farm Corps.
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm excited to hear more about the program and why it drew you in. But Geoffrey, let's hear your mini story too.
Yeah, totally. So you got the bit about growing up in Hong Kong, and if it wasn't obvious, I grew up with no connection to farming. For those of you who might be wondering, Hong Kong is maybe the least agricultural city in the world. I know cities by definition are generally going to trend away from having ag going on, but Hong Kong feels like the most extreme version of that I can imagine. I remember as a kid going into the grocery store, actually, we would kind of run through the aisles and point at all the countries of origin of all the food that was there. And we would marvel at how far some of the food traveled with an air of appreciation. This was back in the day. We're like, oh my gosh, so cool that the beef is from Argentina and the fish is from New Zealand and the vegetables are from California. Like that to us was really cool. That's how I grew up. Really compared to where I am now, a very different appreciation for very different way of connecting with food. But that really was, food is what brought me into farming. I thought that I was actually going to go to culinary school, and I wanted to take a little bit of time off between undergrad and, again, what I thought was going to be enrolling in culinary school. And I wanted to still be involved in food and wanted to be out of my head and more in my body. And I hadn't ever lived outside of a city. I hadn't ever really spent time with nature in this sort of way. And so I found a farm. Like so many beginning farmers, it was essentially woofing.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally fell in love with it. But actually, similar to Kait, what really drew me in was, yes, like the types of activities that farming involves, using, your body, being outside, constantly problem solving and working collaboratively with other folks. Like all of that really, really worked for me. But I think what really solidified farming for me was how it sits at the intersection of so many issue areas that really matter to me: environment, social justice, all of these other sort of side passions that I had kind of considered like personal mission points, or points of, or areas of personal hobby and exploration, I suppose. But farming really presented itself as an active participant in all of these different systems, and it was easy for me at that point to commit myself further into farming. So I came to Oregon for a farm apprenticeship, not through Rogue Farm Corps, although they did work with Rogue Farm Corps, Deck Family Farm in the Willamette Valley, a diversified livestock operation. And it was the first place in the US that really felt like it could be a long-term home for me. And I stayed. So I've been in the Northwest in Oregon and Washington since, let's see, that was 2015, 2016.
Okay.
And so here I am.
Yeah. And now you are working for Rogue Farm Corps. Great.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
thank you both for sharing. I always think it's really useful to hear people's journey, because some of our listeners are at the very first steps of their journey, and how do people get from A to B? So let's pivot to talking about Rogue Farm Corps. Can one of you give us the basic rundown on the organization's history and what you do today, kind of the big picture?
So Rogue Farm Corps, we're celebrating our 20th year anniversary right now. Originally, the organization was started down in Southern Oregon in the Rogue Valley, actually by a group of farmers. So Rogue Farm Corps was originally founded by a group of farms who were looking for a way to support one another and retain a workforce on their farms. So it was originally created by a group of farmers looking for a way to provide structure for an internship program on their farms as a way to do sort of site visits, learning, exchange, and provide a container and legal protection for one another also to have interns on their farm, which is at the time when the program was founded, it wasn't a requirement of the program that participating host farm partners pay a hourly wage. It was more of a old school, I'm going to put that in scare quotes, internship model. And some of the big things that have changed about the program over the course of our 20-year evolution is that we've moved in a lot of ways more towards centering the learning experience and the rights of our program participants as farm workers. So began in service to host farmers. And then over the years, we've built out our resources and our programming with beginning farmer training participants in mind. So some really notable things that have shifted are that we now require all of our host farm partners to hire their apprentices as waged employees. And we offer some additional labor protections for folks who participate in our programs above and beyond state and federal labor law to make sure that they really have time and support to focus on their training and their learning experience, not just as farm laborers, but in addition to the hands-on training that they're doing at the farm. And then another notable change is that we started in this one geographic area in Southern Oregon, but now we work with host farm partner sites all across the state. We currently have 19 participating host farm partners from Yep, down still in the Rogue Valley in Southern Oregon, and then also up as far north as the Portland metro area. We've had host farms participating with us on Oregon's coast, in Northeast Oregon and Cove, Oregon, heading out towards the state's eastern border. And at this point, we're serving 24 apprentices who are placed at host farms. And we've also added on a number of other programmatic arms and projects, including a pilot fellowship farm program, which we can get more into later. And then we also offer the educational component of our training for farm apprentices as its own standalone program that folks can enroll in. And we have another 24 folks participating in that. So we're serving just about 50 program participants this year through that arm. And then Geoffrey didn't mention this, but I will, and then maybe tee it up for him to talk about, is another thing that Rogue Farm Corps has grown into over the years is the establishment of our Future Farms program, which Geoffrey is the director of and administers, which I'm sure he will talk about later. But that's one of the ways that Rogue Farm Corps has been responsive to community needs in the state.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
If you're an experienced vegetable farmer, don't miss out on the 2025 Organic Vegetable Production Conference. In its 9th year, this conference fills that expert-level niche you're looking for. Farmer presenters share the nitty-gritty details of their production practices and also speak on a wide range of topics, from storage crop facilities and pack shed adaptations to pest management, farm worker perspectives, and more. With online sessions on January 23rd and 24th for only $75 and in-person sessions on January 31st and February 1st in Madison, Wisconsin, you can plug in no matter where you are. Register today at bit.ly/OVPC-2025. That's bit.ly/OVPC-2025. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not to spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/GFM. That's farmhand.partners/GFM.
And now, back to the show. Thanks, both of you, for that rundown. So, like I'm hearing, there's these two main parts of the organization's work. There's this facilitating successful apprenticeship programs, and then also helping new farmers plan, start, and grow their businesses. Let's keep talking about the apprenticeship a little bit longer, since that seems to be like the first thing that would come in a farmer's journey. So you've already touched on this a little bit, both of you, but what are the benefits for an apprentice working through a formal program like Rogue Farm Corps versus just applying directly to farms that advertise an apprenticeship program? What does the program offer those people who are learning?
Well, one of the things that I just teed up there a little bit is that we offer additional support and labor protection for our apprentices as farm workers, as workers in a field that I think we all recognize does not have high paying wages and can often be financially challenging for folks to enter into, right? So Rogue Farm Corps mandates that all of our host farm partner sites pay their farmers their farm workers an hourly wage. We also have a cap on how many hours per week our apprentices can work. And we have some residential templates for housing agreements. So if a host farm has a on-farm living situation available for someone, that's something that our organization will go and check out and make sure that it's up to OSHA standards, but also beyond what OSHA requires, right? That this is a spot that somebody would be comfortable in, that they will have enough privacy to focus, rest, recharge, and take care of themselves after the end of a hard day's work. So I mentioned those things because I think that in what I referenced earlier is maybe like the old school farm internship model that I know I came up in, which is when I was learning how to farm, I was working for room and board. Even if I was a full season intern or employee, or I was in a management position, that might still have been the financial arrangement where I was getting paid a stipend, a very low cash stipend, but was also receiving room and board in terms of simple housing accommodations and then food from the farm. So something that folks get from Rogue Farm Corps, and I think that there's also been a cultural and a sea change across the board in sustainable ag, where I think that those arrangements are a little bit less common. And you see more farms working with like a standard employee model than maybe in decades past. But that's definitely something that you get with Rogue Farm Corps, in addition to supports and tools that we have in place for both the apprentice as worker and learner, and also the host farm as supervisor, mentor, employer, to support that relationship between the two and make sure, there's no surety here, but to help set people up for a successful working relationship together and strong communication. And then, of course, we offer a curriculum for folks to take that complements the training that they're doing on the farm. So we organize a series of both online and in-person classes, tours, workshops, and lead people through an educational program that runs from April through October. In that program, folks hear from ag service professionals, from other farmers in the field. They connect with one another as a learning cohort and receive access to a virtual online classroom where they can watch recordings of all of our content, read course outlines, have access to links, articles, et cetera, for the duration of the program, but then also beyond. So a powerful suite of educational content is something that you get when you participate in our program. And we also, I would be remiss to mention, or to neglect to mention, that we provide support for our host farm mentors to actually create the on-farm curriculum that they'll be walking folks through during the course of the farming season. And we also give them structure and tools to facilitate a series of evaluations with their apprentice over the farm season to check in on how that on-farm educational experience or training process is going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I want to dive deeper into a couple of these things that you talked about here that intrigued me. So first of all, it sounds like the biggest difference is, rather than basically being a farm worker, but somebody calling it an apprentice, this is actually very much a model focused on learning and growth for the apprentice as a learner as well as an employee. I think you had mentioned this more old school traditional model of apprentice maybe being just given room and board. And then in my experience, more often than not really given any specific education. Just you are working on the farm and that is your education, which would be in contrast to what you're describing with these online sports. What kind of topics do you go through in these curriculum programs? What kinds of things are covered?
Yeah, in our educational event series, we call it our Beginning Farmer Educational Event Series. Those are the classes that we plan and facilitate. We start at the beginning of the season with grounding to locate ourselves in the social history of U.S. and Oregon agriculture. And then the intention is that the series kind of starts from the soil up. So we look at soil health, we look at the soil food web, We start also with different ground prep techniques earlier on in the season, as well as propagation, and then move through, everything from cultivation, greenhouse and propagation management, irrigation, also through concepts like decolonizing agriculture, farm worker justice, and farm worker rights, but also integrated pest management, orcharding, and perennials. And we just finished up.
So all the things.
A pretty fun. Yeah. I mean, but all of the things, but I will say they're introductory. This is like a zoomed out intro, right? Because in our 26 session class series, we're only going to have time to give people like a first taste in a 2-hour class about, let's say, beekeeping and pollinators, which is our most recent class that we worked with some presenters from Xerxes Society and a local award-winning natural beekeeper to present to our students. So they're really just going to get like that first taste for a lot of these topics. And the idea is that then our host farm mentor partner sites are able to provide a through line and a connection with the content that folks are learning in class or at a farm tour, and tie that into their experience on the ground, which I will say is a constant work in progress, both like us refining our curriculum and our content, and then also helping to support our host farmers to become better educators, facilitators, mentors to make that come alive for people and make sure that that these experiences don't veer into what you were just describing, which is an educational experience in name only, right? We want to make sure that people are really getting the time to spend in conversation and learning on the farms too.
Right. So beekeeping might not be one every farm could follow through on, but say if you're doing your UNOT on irrigation, then ideally that week, maybe the host farm would actually take the time to walk their apprentices through their irrigation setup as opposed to go move pipe. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So that would be the distinguishing feature of an educational experience versus, and I think that people can learn so much as farm workers, but there are going to be gaps, right? If you don't ever have that explicit instruction and pointing out of, okay, yes, go move pipe and you can learn how to set up overhead sprinklers, but that's really different than somebody taking half an hour to walk you through how they are connected to the well, why they chose, a hard set versus drip. So that's great. I know that you're not labor lawyers.
Correct.
So I want to be careful. Any lawyers. No, none of us in this space are lawyers, just so the audience is clear on that. But I am curious. I want to talk about the benefits to the host farms. And it does seem like, from what you were saying, some of the benefit is about some of these legal conundrums of how do you protect yourself as a farm and an employer in a situation that traditionally, let's just talk about the elephant in the room, right? This is, I think, something we're going to talk about something today that a lot of people don't like to talk about, which is that traditional apprentice model is just straight up not legal, right? Like it doesn't meet labor laws. It doesn't meet minimum wage laws in terms of how you provide. Again, I'm not a lawyer, folks. I'm just talking as a farmer here, but how you provide housing legally, there's like rules around that. And a lot of farms, it's just been let's agree not to talk about this and hope that all of our apprentices enjoy their experience and move on and don't complain, right? That's, I think, been how a lot of farms have rolled, right? And there's even whole books, including a book by a very famous farmer who I will not name by name, outlining how to do this. But just so people know, you're vulnerable as a host farm if you work in this model, right? So it sounds like this was part of even the origin story of this group, is helping farmers navigate what it looks like to offer programs like this legally. So can you talk a little bit more about that as it stands today in terms of what kind of support? I know we've had employees, including employees who have lived on the farm. And quite frankly, it was complicated trying to figure out exactly how to do everything right with the legal notices and how to have an agreement around housing that would be legal, et cetera. So the idea that maybe there would be a resource that could help walk farmers through a lot of this sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I know that that's maybe another direction that we'll go with this conversation is what the benefit is to host farms who choose to
Yes.
participate with us and partner with us in our programs. And honestly, coming up as someone who came up and learned how to farm through that informal, like quasi-legal room and board stipend internship model of that's part of why what I was so drawn to working with Rogue Farm Corps now and wanted to become a part of this organization is because I'm really passionate about making sure that when we think about sustainability in an agricultural context, we're thinking holistically about economic, cultural, social stability too. And I think in addition to there being some like legally dubious elements of the old school internship model, I think that it feels to me from a labor rights standpoint, it feels definitely morally dubious. And so the stance that Rogue Farm Corps has taken is we want our farms to be our partner host farm sites to be successful, viable businesses who have a positive employee work culture that are paying their apprentices and their farm crews according to state and federal laws, and that we are helping support our host farmers to do that. So some of the tools that we have available to them are, as you mentioned, we have like a template for farms to put together a residential agreement if that's something they have on offer. We also have employee handbook templates that a farm can use to put together if they're creating that for the first time. And then all of our host farms have to put together and offer an apprentice agreement to a potential apprentice hire that could also serve as a hiring agreement for other employees. So a lot of the support that we can provide to our host farmers is to help them become employers. And again, we're not legal experts. We don't have lawyers here at Rogue Farm Corps, but we do have some support for folks who are setting up payroll or their taxes for the first time. We have some guidance for that. And then we also provide a winter training series that offers for new host farmers some basic HR and supervisor skills like interviewing and onboarding and giving and receiving feedback. Also equity training in an ag context. And something that we're hoping to move into going forward is to provide some kind of 201 or more advanced trainings for our returning host farms or our longer standing host farm partners that are really focused on improving their mentorship skills and facilitating those quality on-farm educational experiences, and also honing in on employee retention and how to create worker-centered farm cultures. But yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up because I think that it's often really overlooked, this question of how do we make sure that we're taking care of the people who work on our farms as whole people. So thanks for bringing that into this.
Thanks, Kait, for sharing so much about the apprenticeship program. So I know this is just one half of what Rogue Farm Corps does at this point, and it sounds like this other half probably evolved out of need from the first half. So in addition to doing this apprenticeship program, it sounds like Rogue Farm Corps also offers help for what comes next to farmers. And that, I assume, is where you come in, Geoffrey. What tell us more about this half of Rogue Farm Corps.
Yeah, totally. It's exactly right. And, kind of building out of what we were talking about in the history of the organization and how you have seen now, or how we've heard how the training programs have evolved. We've been one of the best parts about our work at Rogue Farm Corps is that we get to be in direct contact with the experiences and the needs of beginning farmers in Oregon. And as you can imagine, a lot of beginning farmers, after learning the practical on-farm skills, learning essentially how to farm, how to grow or raise whatever it is that they are growing or raising, whether through an RFC training program or not, a lot of folks want to then go on and start their own farms. That is no simple task. From the land access question to capital and other resources, finding people to farm with. There's so much that goes into setting up, growing, sustaining a farm business, a small farm business. And that's what the Future Farms program really focuses on today. We've taken a sort of like the training program, we've taken many turns in our journey. And that's something that I actually really pride our program in, is again, responding to the needs and also working very closely with this larger ecosystem of farm support organizations across Oregon and the country. So we've found our niche now in business technical assistance, where we really focus our work is in providing beginning farmers and farmers maybe who are in the pre-business stage, farmers who are in the early business stage, with the business technical assistance to start their operations. That ranges from supporting them in business establishment to sorting out their marketing and sales plans, hiring employees, a wide range of topics, land access, access to capital. For us, all of that nests under business planning. So the big stuff that we do is around business planning, and one of our programs, Farm Launch, really focuses on that. So I'll tell you a bit about our programs now. So Farm Launch is a business technical assistance program that runs from October to March each year. We take a cohort of 12 to 15 farmers, and over the course of 6 months, we write business plans. What's really neat about the program is that it combines this wonderful community building cohort learning model with the one-on-one technical assistance, which we have seen to be really successful. It's something that we interviewed a lot of farmers about, and it also a lot of other service providers around the country. And it seems, from our experience and from the experience of others, that at a certain point, farmers really need someone to help them walk through their business questions, like one-on-one. And we really don't want to lose that. But then at the same time, with the cohort, we get this community of learners who get to bounce ideas off of each other, who get to share their knowledge with each other. Farmers are so knowledgeable, so much more than I think often they give themselves credit for. So yeah, Farm Launch combines those two learning modalities. One of the other really, I think, neat sort of farmer-driven design program elements is that we don't have homework in that program, and yet farmers still write their full business plans. And this is something that we've been evolving over the years. Yeah, farmers are really strapped for time, and it's often really hard to get them to sit down and do the office work side of things. Yet there is so much evidence as to why a business plan is important for farmers. I'm happy to talk about that as well. And yeah, we figured that actually we were struck with this question of how do we get farmers to write this business plan that they want, that we know that they want, that the world wants from them, that they need, that would help them, this thing that's so helpful, but no one is doing. And yeah, we came up with this model. We realized that the hardest thing for farmers is to just commit the time to it. And so much of what we do is acting as sort of an accountability partner in that space. So we block out time within each session for individual writing. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, farmers going through this program, ending up on the other side with a business plan, be happy to share success stories about that. And there are, surprising revelations all throughout. And that's really why we do business planning. I mean, business planning is a way to prepare for our farm and sort of imagine our farm, with way less cost.
Geoffrey, you mentioned that you have success stories. Here's what I'd love to hear at this point. Okay, I want to hear a success story from Rogue Farm Corps that might involve both of the programs. Do you have people who have gone through both, or do you end up with different people in each crowd? Or can you each share a success story? Maybe an apprentice story and a Future Farm story. I want to hear, and I'm also really interested in hearing what about the programs is really helping folks launch. Kait, do you have a success story up your sleeve that you can share about the apprentice program?
Yeah, I can talk about a few recent ones. From our last year's apprentice cohort, we have several folks who have stayed on at their host farms and are stepping into more responsibility or management positions. And I mentioned that because I think sometimes when we talk about what farming success looks like, we have this filter that says a success story is one in which someone becomes a farm owner operator. And something else that we're really invested in is we're making a deep bench, right? Like we want people who are skilled and committed to a career in agriculture. And that doesn't always mean launching your own business. It might mean being like a really stellar irrigation or fertility manager or fill in the blank. Maybe you're working in marketing for the farm even. But so we have a couple of apprentices from last year who've stayed on and are now like in crew lead positions at their farms, which is awesome. We also have a graduate from our apprenticeship program last year who this year started her own seedling business this year, selling flats and nursery starts, which is really cool. And then in a different direction, also part of building out our deep food systems bench in the state of Oregon and beyond, I can point to another recent grad from 2021 who went on after Rogue Farm Corps to work at a nonprofit farm, first leading education and volunteer groups with local high school students. This apprentice, Corey, is still engaged in that work part-time, but now also works for an organization in Portland called the Rosewood Initiative, which is in the process of building out a urban food forest and a food desert in Portland, which is really cool. And then we have other apprentice or intern program graduates that might be a little bit confusing. We used to have both an internship and an apprentice arm, and then now we just have one apprentice arm at our program. But we have apprentice or intern grads who have gone on to start their own farms, who are maybe working as ag service professionals now. We have someone who's actually currently sitting as our board chair, who's a program grad who also works for OSU Extension, Oregon State University Extension Service.
Great.
And I know that there is at least one 2023 apprentice graduate who went through Farm Launch last year. And Geoffrey could say more about what those folks are up to now.
Yeah, we've had a number of training program grads through our various training programs come through Farm Launch, come through our Changing Hands program, which I haven't talked about yet, but that just briefly it's a long-standing workshop that we put on, and that is a space, a physical in-person space that provides education and networking for landholders and land seekers. So that's something that's focused again on that land access side of things. And what we realized there is that there's not a lot of opportunity for landholders and land seekers to meet. And that's a really important part of the land linking process. So much of it is tied to, for the landholders, tied to their emotional connection with place. And the sense of sort of farming legacy is often strong. And a lot of the times they are looking for they might not have an identified successor, and whether for finding someone to lease some land or to purchase land or to find some other land access arrangement, meeting another farmer who has values aligned with them makes a lot of sense. So that's a whole nother topic of conversation, land access. But that is one of our longstanding programs. But yeah, through our Future Farms program, we've had several training program grads come through Farm Launch. We also offer just the one-on-one side of business technical assistance. So again, with Farm Launch, that's the cohort and one-on-one. We also offer just straight one-on-one business technical assistance to our training program grads, and that's meeting them wherever they're at. And truly, it is a full range of questions that we work through with them. Sometimes it is very sort of brass tacks farming stuff. I have a wool problem. How do I deal with it? Sometimes it's more business side stuff. I've been running a CSA for 5 years and I think I need to move to wholesale because I just can't deal with customers anymore, whatever it is. And, we try to map through those potential changes to their operations. But through all these programs, I am really happy to get to see how training program graduates get to progress along on this track. And within the farm launch program, I think, which is what we were talking about primarily, this is going to be maybe a counterintuitive way of framing a success story. But I'm going to start with this, and then I will give you maybe more predictable success stories. But
okay.
Every year we have participants in farm launch who, by the time we get to March, by the time we get to the end of the program, realize that, they go in with the intention of writing a business plan for a farm business that they want to start. And by the end of it, they realize that they don't actually want to start farm businesses anymore. That to me is the sign of mature business decision making. And that to me is a sign of a successful participant asking the questions and working through this process of writing their business plan. And that is the value of the business plan. Another stat that I love to share is that entrepreneurs with business plans, or businesses with business plans, operators with business plans, are nearly 300% more likely to close their businesses than those without, which might seem counterintuitive, but it's because they can see when things aren't going well and they know when to close up shop. And that is so important, as opposed to those who maybe don't see the writing on the wall or aren't making the mature business decisions. And in farming, involving so much of ourselves and often so many of involving our community in really intimate ways, to not know when enough is enough, when to throw in the towel, can be really devastating financially, interpersonally. And I don't want to scare people out there, but I do want to encourage everybody that, we are farming as our whole selves. Nobody gets into farming casually. Like, we are all farming because we're deeply passionate about it. I can say that's probably true for most of us. And it's really easy to get that tunnel vision and to pour more than you have into your farm. So that's a weird way to frame a success story, but I love to point those out.
Now, I'm going to affirm that, Geoffrey. I think those are important things. I think for people to have that information up front when life is short, and we can be, I don't think that somebody who farms for 5 years and then quits is not going to value the experiences they had. But if, as you're saying, they can know in year 1 or even 2, like, oh, this is not going where I need it to go, then maybe they can pivot sooner and think, maybe I'm better off as a farm manager, right? I have these skills now that I can contribute to another farm.
Exactly.
Maybe I should be pursuing that. Or maybe I need to just find a whole different angle in life and have time to do that. I actually once did a whole presentation at a conference, a panel discussion about the value of quitting, and knowing when that moment is, whether it's an enterprise on your farm, right? It doesn't have to be the whole farm. This is probably another thing somebody with a business plan could see, is maybe it's not so much like this farm isn't working, but my CSA is not working, like you said, or my wholesale is not working. And on the flip side, maybe my seedling business is making all the profit on my whole farm. Yeah, you just can't see that stuff if you don't know how to watch for it. Okay, go ahead.
Right, exactly. No, I appreciate that. I'm always a little nervous to bring that up because I think we also are inundated with success stories. And I think that's the social media bias, perhaps. That's just maybe the positivity bias that we, as optimistic farmers and farm operators, soon to be farm operators, the lens through which we see our futures. And that's a beautiful thing. And I don't want to extinguish any of that passion, that excitement, that gumption. Like, that is beautiful stuff. But also, knowing when to make a change or when to maybe take a pause and a pivot, like, these are really important. And again, mature business senses and business muscles.
We could say we need to know when to hold them, and we need to know when to fold them, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I will say on another note that we've had a lot of farm businesses start from farm launch, first of all. And that is another stat that I always present alongside it, that entrepreneurs with a business plan, or that create a business plan out of a business idea, are 150% more likely to actually start that business. So if there's someone who's maybe looking for that inspiration to take the leap, a business plan can often be the missing piece that makes that happen. And I have a quote actually from one of my participants from last year that kind of speaks to this. So they said, "This project that I love and believe in with my whole heart now feels accessible and manageable in a way it never did before." I've believed my farm vision for years, but have always felt stuck on the edge of making it into a reality. Now I have a sense of the ground beneath me and a path forward, and I feel energized once again to put in the work to bring my goals to fruition. And I think there's, that's a very wholesome quote, but I think actually something that's really important to pull out of that is the word vision and goal. And we do a lot of visioning and goal setting work in our program. And the approach that I take to it is really not trying to bifurcate the personal life from the farm life. There's no way in practice that they are going to be separate. And so I like to bring that up from the get-go and to address that from the beginning. That's really important to the way that I approach business planning. And that's always, always present. We are not life planning in Farm Launch, but we are fully recognizing at every step of the way that the business that we are planning for will be in direct harmony or discord with life. And obviously one leads to a more durable and a plan that will create hopefully more longevity than the other. We can deal with discord for some amount of time, and I think we're able to tune it out, but eventually it catches up to us. So I try to address that from the get-go. Yeah, but oh gosh, I mean, the success stories, I will also say, in our last round of Farm Launch, we had 14 participants, and 11 out of the 14 left the program with a business plan, something that they didn't have at the start, which is really exciting to me. The 3 who didn't leave with complete business plan drafts, they also said that they have the tools to finish the drafts when they need to. Life got in the way. It happens. But what happens with those business plans, I think this is also important. And for that, I'll point to a story from a participant 2 years ago. Recently, our local ag lender, they set up a grant program offering beginning farmers, a grant, like we've seen many times before. But it was quite a significant grant, and it was a very competitive program. They were awarding 2 to 3 projects, farm projects in Oregon. And it's specifically a grant for startup farms. And one of our Farm Launch participants applied and got the grant, which they said was largely due to the business plan that they had and their ability to share that, with the lender, to be able to share their vision and their ideas for their farm clearly, and to be able to fully back it up in all the different directions. Not only is it I have a plan to grow this, but I have a plan to sell it. I have a plan to keep it up. I have a plan to fund it. I have a plan. So that was really, really exciting to hear. And it's August right now. I don't know when people are going to be listening to this, but Farm Launch will be starting up again this October, and hopefully every October after that.
And this program is online, I assume. So, and it's not necessarily Oregon specific. So, or is it?
It is Oregon specific, and it is online.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And we try to make it. We meet in the evenings, 6 to 7:30 p.m., trying to hit that sweet spot, because we know a lot of folks are working on farms. That's also why we run it from October to March. Yeah, it's a program that I would love to see expand to other states, and maybe one day it will. But for now, it is Oregon only.
Yeah. So all this awesome stuff that we've been talking about, unfortunately, is in Oregon. So I want to, but I also feel like there's so much here that is valuable. And I hope that all along the way with these conversations, there have been bits and pieces that are valuable to our listeners, even if they're not in our state, around how do you shape a successful apprenticeship program, whether it's just on your own farm or more of a cooperative thing. What is important in those first steps of starting a farm? These are all things that are bigger than RFC. What I would like us to think more about our audience outside of Oregon. You two have a lot of experience in farming and also a lot of experience working with different farms and farmers. Let's talk a little bit about this weird world of farming, farmer training, and market farming in general. I'm curious, with the work you're doing, what kinds of things you see as future challenges for people in this world, and what are some of the solutions, like with farm training, farm startup? What are you seeing? Kait, do you want to take the lead since Geoffrey was just talking, or who's ready?
Yeah, thinking about challenges to farmer training, it makes me think about that question of how do we balance the needs of a production farm with, or let's say the imperatives of a production farm that's working to grow as much as they can to feed communities, also potentially, right, to be a viable business that's taking care financially of the people who are doing the work, with making sure that there's spaciousness and time to provide training, to pause and let people answer questions and focus on education too. So that's one challenge in farmer training that we're thinking about in a couple of different ways. One is this question of there's the economic question, right? And so something that we've been thinking about and may explore in the future is securing funding to compensate host farmers for their time, for both the time that they spend working with our apprentices, but maybe also thinking about how do we help support farms that are in those first years of business. This is an idea that's come up before, but it will require a great deal of fundraising and development to be able to pull something like that off. For example, supplementing or paying a portion maybe of the wages or the payroll that goes towards apprentices for the first year or two that a host farmer participates in our program. And then maybe in an enduring way, compensating host farmers, as I just mentioned, for the hours that they put into helping to educate beginning farmers in training while they're at their farm operations. That's one challenge. Another challenge that's inherent in a apprenticeship program is navigating relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's back to communication. That's back to supporting our host farmers as strong supervisors, mentors, and employers. And I think that that's something that we'll always be working on improving and uplifting, is helping to give our farmers tools to be better communicators and to build out those finer points of conflict management and human resource elements on their farms.
And Kait, I'm curious, in your work with helping organize this, have you come across any great resources out there for farmers wanting to work on these skills for themselves, wanting to build an apprentice program, work on their communication?
Yeah, thanks for that opening to plug a couple of things. One is Fair Share CSA Coalition puts on a great series of farm-focused workshops called Becoming the Employer of Choice. And those are things that people can keep an eye out for and sign up for. Those are online classes that generally responsive to a farmer's production schedule. They'll happen over the fall and the winter. And that's a group that's based in the Northeast, but again, they're online classes. So you can sign up for those regardless of where you live. And something that we found really useful about the format is they're presented by farmers to farmers. So the scenarios and the management examples that you'll be walking through are very specific to small and mid-sized agricultural enterprises. So would definitely recommend that. And then for sure, people should engage with publications and resources from Not Our Farm. I don't know if they've interacted with Growing for Market podcast or magazine before, but Not Our Farm is a group that's made up of farm workers, not farm owners. And they have a resource specifically for people who work on farms to sort of ask yourself a series of questions and vet different employment opportunities, which is great. They've also released a really impactful report that represents perspectives both of farm managers or owner operators and then also farm workers, and is presenting information to both parties about how you can create a highly functioning, welcoming, worker-centered farm environment. So yeah, would make a plug for people to check those out. And those, I believe that there's a fee for the Fair Share CSA Coalition Winter Training Series, but Not Our Farm. All of those resources are free for folks to access.
Excellent. Thank you, Kait. Those sound like great resources. Geoffrey, thoughts for the rest of the country?
Yeah.
People starting farm businesses. What are some of the challenges that you can share more broadly about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that comes back pretty much anybody I talk to in Oregon and around the country is land access. We have a major problem. I don't know if everybody would call it a problem. I think some people are calling it their system design at work. But in any case, the system is not working for small beginning farmers. And land access is, I think, especially in the past 5 years, what we've seen in terms of just how land prices have, especially farmland prices, have increased. It was already very challenging for a farmer to be able to pay for the land with what they're growing from the land, if that makes sense. Now, I think that it is frankly untenable. It's basically mathematically impossible to make that work. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't farm, but a lot of what I'm seeing is that farmers who are accessing land are maybe leaning on resources that they have saved up, leaning on resources that they may be pooling in collaboration with partners, whatever it is. And to me, that's a big challenge. I know I'm presenting a challenge that also might not have a clean solution, but that is just, to speak honestly, that's a big one. And I'm sure everybody listening has heard this or been touched by this in some way, but here's another person pointing it out. I will say that in terms of ways of addressing that, one thing that I'm really excited about and something that RFC has begun to put some of our work and resources into is collaborative farming. This is the final branch of the Future Farms program that I've been holding on to because I've been waiting for this question to come up as well. Collaborative farming, yeah, we started to hear people ask for more resources on collaborative farming, mostly I think in response to two major aspects of what makes farm life challenging. One is, again, the economics of it, land access to resources, the cost of farming versus the relative earnings from those costs, the earnings from what you pay to grow and what you can sell for. And then the other piece of it is, the isolation of it, the sense of, I don't know, I think it also feels like a particularly American idea of the individualist, the farmer. And I have been really excited to see pushback against that, and excited to see people organizing to farm in collaboration in community. And so, I'll just point back to a couple years back in 2020, we ran a workshop series that covered all sorts of different topics. Land access was covered, like capital access, all sorts of stuff around beginning farms or beginning farm businesses, rather, I should say. And we kind of had an inkling that people might be interested in collaborative farming. So we did one session on that, and it was attended. It was out-attended. It out-attended the other ones by like a sizable, it was like maybe 2 to 3 times more people showed up to that single event out of like the 16 events that we ran than anything else. So we're like, whoa, okay. We had a sense that people were interested in collaborative farming, didn't realize it was quite that there were so many people and they were willing to show up and hungry for knowledge. So long-winded answer. We have now a branch of work that's dedicated to collaborative farming. It's new. We are learning. We would love for you all to learn with us. You can find more information on our website for that. We are posting more resources as we learn. And when I say we, I really mean our collaborative farming specialist, Madeline, who is amazing. And just to show like my ignorance on the topic, like when I was imagining out and building out this role that Madeline is now taking on, I came up with like three or four of the main ways that farmers might engage in collaborative farming. And one of the first tasks was to write a quote unquote simple definitions guide. And we quickly discovered that there was nothing simple about collaborative farming. This also, I think, speaks back to what Kait was just mentioning about, the challenges of working together with other people. And that is a trade-off. I think by pooling resources, you can access a scale of farming or access farming to begin with in a different way. And the trade-off is that you do it with other people, which means you have to learn to communicate. And there's so much I could say about this, but I just encourage listeners to check out the website. We have a lot of great stuff on there. Get involved.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that the website is in the show notes so people can go and check it out. Geoffrey, Kait, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience of market farmers about your experience, the work, Rogue Farm Corps?
Yes, it would be very sad if I didn't make a plug for our last program in our farmer training division before we sign off, and that is the Regenerative Farming Fellowship. I mentioned it super briefly earlier. Another challenge that we face, not just in Oregon, but nationally, when we think about how to train and equip the next generation of farmers and ranchers, is again that like economic precarity reality that these are often not well paid jobs, right? Farm worker jobs, especially entry level farm worker jobs. And it can be challenging, scary, and just not possible for some people who might be interested in exploring a career in sustainable ag to make that leap and say, yep, I can commit to working a full season for minimum wage on a farm somewhere, right? Maybe they have family that they're supporting. Maybe there are other life obligations that would preclude them from doing that. So we are in the second year right now of our fellowship farm program, which is a training site that we manage, not with a partner host farm, but our own training farm site that we do have a nonprofit partner farm that we work with on that project, but we actually have our own staff there who's engaged in training and working with 5 farming fellows down in Southern Oregon. And that's a program that was largely motivated by this equity concern of wanting to provide a part-time sort of first taste for people who are farm curious and wondering if this is something that they want to commit to in a more meaningful way. So our fellowship farmers attend our beginning farmer educational event series, just like our apprentices do, but they're working 2 days a week part-time at this regenerative training site. And our farming fellows are also compensated for the time that they spend in our beginning farmer educational event series. So they're paid for the time that they devote to attending our classes and our farm tours. So another piece of the puzzle, another potential solution set. And there's plenty more to say about that, but it can be saved for another time. And then following up on that resource from Not Our Farm, the title that folks should look for is Farming into the Future by Centering Farm Workers, a deep dive into what diversified vegetable farm employees value in a workplace. And that was funded by a SARE grant and is a partnership between Not Our Farm and some other groups. So check that out.
Excellent. Excellent. Check that out, folks. Geoffrey, anything you want to add?
Oh, gosh. I mean, just if you're even curious for a conversation and you're not even sure what you're going to say, that's enough of a reason to get in touch with me. I would love to hear from you. There's always stuff to talk about, and nothing makes me happier than getting to talk to farmers and support them, even if it's supporting them in trying to figure out like, what is the question I'm trying to ask? Yeah, there's so much about this. And from my own time as a farmer, I felt like every season that went by, I realized that I knew less, not more. And yeah, no one has to do this alone. So really, really just encourage you to reach out. We want to hear from you. That's why we're here. And if I can't help you, I can probably find someone who can. So.
Okay. So the best way to find the two of you would be at the Rogue Farm Corps website. I assume that there's links to your emails and things
Indeed.
there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Geoffrey and Kait. I appreciate the work you do, and I appreciate your time here today. And it was great talking about the programs and learning more about what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for the time, Katie. And anyone listening to this who's interested in interacting with our apprenticeship program, keep an eye out for applications to open for the 2025 apprenticeship season in January.
Okay. We'll definitely make sure this runs before that. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and information from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and you haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never get billed. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 per year, you get a year of the magazine, plus over 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.